What does Georgia hockey need to grow, and how do you keep young players coming back? We explore the gaps in the state's hockey pipeline, a new approach to player development, and how the hockey barn fits into that puzzle. Let's talk about that and more on this episode of Peach State Puck. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, Georgia hockey fans, and welcome to yet another episode of Peach State Puck. As always, I'm your host, Matteen Rad, and while there's a bunch of hockey news to delve into, I've got a little bit of personal news myself, and that's the ring on this finger right here. Man, I'm just on a high. I'm on cloud nine. I wish this could just be an episode all about a wedding recap, and my wife could be my guest, honestly. It was such a beautiful, beautiful day. Shout out to my producer on this show and as well on the Athens Rock Lobsters broadcast, Stephen Turner, because he was on the dance floor all night long with his wife, and he was one of many people that felt like they had a great time. And it was just such a beautiful day from the first time, from seeing my wife Paige in her dress to, entertaining our guests with a little song that I sang. Our first dance, our final dance, the bubble send-off. It was just a beautiful day, and it was followed up by a beautiful honeymoon, me and my wife going to St. Lucia. Tremendous amenities. Shout out to Sandals Grand St. Lucian for just a beautiful time. It was our first time ever having a butler experience, and I don't think it's something that I'm wired well for, if I'm being honest. I have a hard time as is asking people for favors, and when you're asking people to bring you food or bring you an extra blanket or a mattress topper, which I needed, very, very firm beds if that's what you're into over at the Sandals Grand St. Lucian. So it took some adjustment, but man, they really took care of us, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful country. Mountains, volcanoes, me and my wife going to the Sulphur Springs. I'm still getting used to calling her my wife, but it's a fun habit to get used to. And despite the fact that we had plenty of room on the flight, I ended up kind of sitting weird with my right ankle. There was a little bit of discomfort that day, and then 2 days ago, I woke up really barely able to walk. I was just about able to go to the restroom, to take care of your morning business. I was just about able to do that and had to go straight back to bed, try to work it out, stretch it out, and then eventually make my way downstairs. Yesterday morning, I wake up and it's even worse, and luckily my wife is working from home. I said, "Hey, how busy is your day today?" She goes, "I've got a meeting in about 5 minutes." I was like, "Well, can you take me to urgent care at some point?" She did, as she's an extremely generous, courteous person. And luckily, I'm feeling a lot better. They said, "All right, we're going to give you a steroid shot." And I was like, "All right," stuck my right foot out, expecting that's where the shot was going to be placed. They said, "Actually, it goes in your buttocks," as Forrest Gump would say. And it was an experience. It was a painful one. But ultimately, today I feel a lot better. Didn't even have to take a pain pill today. So modern medicine strikes again. Thankful for feeling a lot better. So those are all the news items for my personal life. Let's get into some of the important stuff happening with hockey around the state of Georgia. Let's jump into our Peach State hockey news segment. It's getting to be a more exciting time in the offseason as more and more news drifts in about our Georgia teams, and we'll start with the Atlanta Gladiators. The Gladiators are teasing a press conference saying that it's something big, taking place at Gas South Arena August 20th at 6 p.m. And based on a little bit more research, there hasn't been too much put on the details of this press conference. I think it could be more information about the Hockey Heritage Weekend that is taking place on their promotional schedule in March. They have 3 games on the schedule, And I believe they'll be paying homage to the teams of Atlanta's past. Now, we've seen the Gladiators do this before. They had massive success with their Believe in Blue Land Thrashers takeover, always brings out a big crowd. And I think they'll have 3 different games in which they'll be trying to do the same thing against the Everblades in March of 2027. I think what's going to happen is they'll play one game as the Thrashers, one as the Flames, and one as the Knights. Maybe this press conference will also preview jerseys, logos, alumni appearances, maybe something even broader with the heritage of Atlanta hockey, which I think is really, really exciting. So fun stuff coming from the Gladiators. We'll see if that's what the press conference will be all about. Eyes peeled for that August 20th press conference date. Some slightly older news here with the Savannah Ghost Pirates, but a new assistant coach named by Jared Stahl, and that's someone that he goes way back with. His name is Justin Sorial. He's spent several seasons now with the New Hampshire Avalanche youth hockey program, and he goes back with Stahl back to their days playing in the AHL together with the Charlotte Checkers. So Stahl brings someone that he knows well into his coaching staff. The full schedules are out for the SPHL. They've been released, and unsurprisingly, our 2 Georgia teams will play each other quite a bit. The Athens Rock Lobsters will open the season at Aikens Ford Arena on October 16th against the Macon Mayhem, and the 2 teams will play each other a total of 10 times this upcoming season. Taking a look at the schedule, something else that sticks out to me on the Athens side, only 2 home games against the PD Ice Cats. We mentioned previously that having that established rivalry was something that I thought would be good for the fans, but only 2 home games. Hopefully we'll see the Ice Cats in the tank more in the playoffs, as Athens is going to want to exact some postseason revenge against their rivals that have joined them in the SPHL. Also covering the Rock Lobsters, a couple more signings have been announced by Athens, both newcomers, and both, in my opinion, very, very exciting. Connor Galloway, a former Gladiator in his own right and a native of Sugar Hill, joins the club. I've reached out to Connor, and I'm hoping to have him on the show in a couple of weeks here. They've also signed Sebastian Smith, a really exciting profile, 24-year-old who has been prolific for nearly a decade now, going back to his high school days. An extremely accomplished player at Adrian College, not with a D3 program, but with the ACHA program, where he won the national championship in 2024 and competed in 3 national championship finals. The Macon Mayhem with a couple of signings of their own. Sebastian Rassar, who FPHL fans will know from the Danbury Hat Tricks, is back with the Mayhem after just 7 games with the team last year. We'll see if he gets more of a chance this year. I still don't think there's been news about Josh Boyko, who's been a staple in Macon for some time, any announcement of his return yet. So we'll see what happens as more of the signings develop, and we'll see what's going on with the goaltending for Macon as we get closer to the start of the season. They've also announced the re-signing of Nick Deneen. The stay-at-home D-man logged 5 points in 50 games for the team last year. Maybe the biggest Georgia hockey news lately, we've got a rebrand in the FPHL with Columbus River Dragons. Not a Scott brand, although he has his history with Columbus. The River Dragons have revealed a new logo, and I think it kind of follows suit with most of the rebrands that you've seen any company do over the past 5 to 10 years. And that philosophy is as simple as possible. Taking a look at the crest, that's what I look at it as almost, as more of a soccer crest kind of feel than a hockey logo. It looks strikingly to me like the Bacardi bat. It seems fans themselves have some mixed opinions on it. For me, I never make my final opinion on a logo until I see it on a sweater. So let's see what the new year, the new season brings, and hopefully that logo is going to look a lot better popping off of a Columbus River Dragons sweater. That does it for the news, but that leads us straight into our interview, which I'm incredibly excited about. Someone that we've talked about a little on the show and is coming on to tell us all about this kind of revolution in how hockey players in Georgia approach their practice in the game, everything outside of the game itself, how they approach it. And so I'm very, very excited to welcome founder of the Hockey Barn, Kyle Kinzie. Let's jump right into that interview. Today's guest is a hockey lifer who has spent more than 26 years coaching the game and thinking deeply about what makes players fall in love with it and then stick with it. Born in Buffalo and raised in Ohio, he eventually brought that passion to Georgia and developed a new vision for player development. Fewer lines and whistles, more creativity, competition, community, and pure enjoyment of the game. He's the founder and president of the Hockey Barn, a new home for Georgia hockey players and families that aims to help lay the foundation for the future of the sport here in the Peach State. Welcome to the show, Kyle Kinzie. Kyle, thank you for joining us, my friend.
Absolutely. Great to be here. Really, really excited.
Before we talk about the here and now of your hockey life, I want to go back to the past a little bit. Could you take us back to your introduction to the sport and the people who made you fall in love with hockey?
Yeah, no, what wonderful, wonderful question. So, my dad played, growing up in Buffalo, my dad played a lot, spent a lot of time playing in Canada. So did my uncle. My first set of equipment that I ever wore was like my uncle's when he was a kid, which was way dated. Like, these kids complain about, wearing like hand-me-downs. Like I had the ultimate hand-me-downs when I first started. But yeah, I learned to skate at a young age. I think I had my first concussion when I was like 4 or 5 at an open skate. And I really can't remember how many I've had after that. But anyways, that started the role. But for me, falling in love with hockey was really easy. I love the competition. I love the speed. I love the teamwork, the friendships. That's a huge part of it. The belonging, the connection. Those early experiences, for me, are what I really, really want, every player, whether youth or adult, to really understand and to get. And, everybody loves the game for different reasons, but, the fact that they have the opportunity to fall in love is so important.
I think that shows as well, your commitment to the game, getting concussed at age 4 or 5 and still sticking with it. At your highest level, what kind of player were you and how far did you realistically believe that hockey could take you before you retired?
Yeah, it's interesting. When you're a kid, you're like, "Oh, I'm going to the show," and then once when you're that kid, and big fish in small pond, you kind of like you're like, "Wow, this is excellent." And then when you become that little fish in a big pond, and that's like showcase tournaments and things like that, where you're really stretching your talent level, you kind of quickly realize like, wow, there's a lot of great players. But for me, from a style of player, I was a winger. So I rotated between left wing and right wing. I loved being F1. I was the missile getting shot into those corners to create opportunities in front of the net. And I absolutely loved every bit of that. Also, what helped shape, myself as a player. I was lucky enough to have some amazing coaches and amazing teammates. And, I believe like at, from Pee Wee and beyond, which Pee Wee is 12U now. I was a captain or an alternate. So, having an opportunity to become a leader and be surrounded by, older players that taught me what it looked like to lead, made a big difference. So, but yeah, and on like where I thought I could go before I retired. I mean, that's a tough one. Everybody wants to go, but you get to a point where you kind of realize that hockey's a lifestyle and not a career. And that's when you're exposed to all these great players, and all these people that make that challenging. But anyways, you know, I wanted to make it to the show, and then you realize quickly that it's hard. It's hard for us to do that. So, anyways.
I think your experience as a leader, kind of in almost every level of your life, I'm sure helped the transition into coaching, which you threw yourself completely into at the age of 19 after you were forced into an early retirement because what I've seen you describe as a serious medical event or a life-threatening medical condition. What happened, and how did having to let go of the ability to play shape the coach and hockey leader that you later became?
Yeah, so I had a pulmonary embolism when I was 19. I was at Miami University. I had an injury. Probably a stick or a puck to behind my leg, kind of like the backside of the knee. I was training dry land one day, kind of passed out, called mommy. Mommy's like, get to the ER. So I drove myself to the emergency room. Later found out that I parked, over a curb on top of a bush at the ER at McCullough Hyde Hospital in Oxford, Ohio. So it was a serious event. I was in the ICU for 2 weeks. Found out I had a genetic blood disorder, and ended my hockey career. To this day, I'm on blood thinners. I still wear my badge of honor here, which is my blood thinners necklace that I have to wear in case I'm never like in an accident or anything. So it ended my career pretty quickly at 19.
Well, what an inspiring story for what you've done, both in and outside of hockey ever since that retirement. At 19, did it feel like a retirement, or did it feel like almost, having part of your identity and who you are taken away?
Yeah, I feel like retirement is usually, intentional or a choice. And to me, this wasn't a choice. I actually went through, kind of some heavy emotional battles with, why is it ending, and I'm not ready for it to end, and things like that. And then, you have to realize, or at least for me, I realized, hockey was part of my identity, whether I was playing or coaching, and for me it was like like hockey gave me that identity whether I was playing or not, but then like kind of losing the ability to play gave me purpose with what I had created. So I almost, I say like hockey gave me the identity, and then kind of like losing the ability to play drove that purpose.
I think that's there's no truer, testament to what you hear about everything happening for a reason. Playing in Ohio and also in Buffalo, where you grew up, what access or hockey infrastructure did you take for granted that you later realized players in Georgia were missing?
Huh. It's hard to take things for granted when at 12 you've got 4 practices a week. So at the moment, this may be the opposite of taking it for granted, but you're like, man, okay, we got another practice. Like, do we really have Thursday night practice? Where now, I tell people about practicing 4 nights a week, and we would have practices at 4 different rinks. So we'd be at a different rink every night, and sometimes driving 45 minutes to an hour to get to those rinks. But I was blessed enough, and my teammates were blessed enough to have access, beyond what anybody down here really understands or comprehends. So it's hard. I don't know if I really took it for granted in that way, but it's, I mean, it was a big difference. The access was significantly different, but it's not just access to time, it's also the structure of the time and the quality of that time, because I had the ability to free play. I had the ability through my relationships to be able to go in a rink after it closed and be able to go before it opened. And that was some of the most fun I ever had playing hockey, were those late night hours, those early mornings where there is no structure, there's no whistle, and it's just a bunch of friends out having fun, getting creative, making mistakes. Kind of like that pond hockey feeling. And that's what I believe, no one around here, at least that I've come across, has ever really experienced if you grow up playing here. And that I think is a big component of what we're missing.
Feeling that love as a young player, and then, as you said, finding a new purpose and trying to kind of foster that love in younger players. Was there an experience in your first few years of coaching that kind of permanently changed you, or made you know that you were in the right line? Maybe a player that you developed, or a lesson that you learned along the way?
Yeah. So, for me, I think it's kind of like it's probably like a cobbling of lessons. So I started coaching 18U high school prep hockey when I was 21, almost 22. So I'm not so far removed from those 18-year-olds that I was coaching. And for me, it was figuring out how to connect with them. And I went through this growth of becoming a reasonably good coach, and also learning how to manage people professionally. I had the opportunities to manage and lead people professionally as a very young executive. And honestly, I fed off both. I believe that what helped me become a great leader, a young leader, helped me become a great young coach. And that was understanding people and what motivates them, because not everybody responds the same way. Players and employees need to be coached and led in different ways. So getting to know them personally, connecting with the human, whether it be a player or an employee, helped me figure out the best ways to motivate. I didn't start off like that. As a leader, I was more of a manager, right? Like, I followed processes. I didn't really get to know the people and what motivated them. I was very similar as a hockey coach. So I had to figure out how to connect with people, how to build those relationships, and how to empower. So for me, those early years were a lot of like this chemistry set of like, how do I connect with people? What's been wonderful is that those players that I coached, back in the early 2000s, I still am connected with today. They now have, they've been married and have kids of their own, and they're adults. But no, I learned an awful lot about myself as a leader and a coach in those early years.
I think that segues me beautifully into the next question. Hockey people talk constantly about culture. As impressive as your hockey resume is, your resume as an executive in the professional world may be even more impressive. In the corporate world, how did you learn to distinguish, a real culture as opposed to like a collection of slogans and motifs?
So, I mean, a culture is only as good as the people who are living it. So, for me, whether that's on the ice, on a bench, or in a boardroom, you have to be connected to the people component. And for me, what's been great, and this may be a really good example to tie the two together. My general manager, his name's Ian McDonald. I actually coached him at KSU. Absolutely phenomenal player and phenomenal coach. But we built a culture together at KSU. I saw the way he led. He saw the way I coached. Ian's now my general manager. And when I presented him with what I was building in the hockey barn and shared with him, the vision, the approach, our pillars to train, compete, and belong. And he understood what I was building, and how we were building into the culture we were going to create. Who better than someone who's lived within my culture, who's seen the way I coach? So I think that's a really, really good example. I don't know. You may disagree, but I feel like that's one of the best examples is finding like people that have a like wiredness about them that they understand. Because people have asked me like, well, hey, are you going to franchise the hockey barn? I'm like, maybe. But the reality is, I'm not doing anything unless I know that my vision's intact, that our culture is completely locked, because we will not expand if I'm not comfortable with the ability to extend that culture and extend that vision and be able to execute on it. So it's very similar with leading. It's like hiring new people. You want to hire people that are going to impact the culture in a positive way, be additive to the culture and not detract from it.
And I completely agree with you. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the people that you've surrounded yourself with building the hockey barn in just a second. You and I are obviously both passionate about the hockey scene here in Georgia. Me as a native Georgian, you originally born in Buffalo, raised in Ohio. What originally brought you south? And at what point did you realize Georgia was where you wanted to make your impact on the game?
Yeah. So professionally, I just exited a business, a technology startup, and I had an opportunity to be flexible with where we live. My wife wanted to get south; she wanted to get out of the snow in the winters. So I uncovered an opportunity, or an opportunity found me to move down here to Georgia. We moved to Marietta initially. We live in Milton now. But coming down here, just absolutely fell in love with Georgia, but work moved me down here. I have since, built that organization and sold it to private equity as a part of the leadership team. But that's what initially brought me down here. It was work.
What did you initially notice about the hockey scene in Georgia, and when did it stop feeling like, the state where you lived and began feeling like the hockey community that you wanted to help build?
Yeah, well, the good thing is we moved down here in 2015. And my oldest, who's now 16, um, was playing. And so he was a young player. I think his time he was a mite, so 8U. And so I jumped into the hockey scene and became part of the Atlanta hockey community immediately. Our first drink here was the Ice Forum in Kennesaw. So that's where Colin first started playing. I first started coaching down here, coaching cross ice, and then coaching AU with my son. So what's interesting is I was able and had the pleasure of being a hockey coach well before my kids ever played. But that ultimate gift is being wanted by your kids to coach them. So, my son, asked me like, well, hey, will you coach this? Would you do this? I'm like, sure, you want me to. So that's how I got into the hockey scene locally here, and quite honestly, immediately became part of that community.
What does Georgia hockey do better than people in what we'll call more traditional hockey markets might assume?
Yeah, this our hockey community can be so tight knit, and the connections of players and players' families is unreal. Atlanta's a huge city. I mean, I'm from Buffalo, right? That's not a huge city. And then grew up playing most of my hockey, youth years, through early years, as an adult, up to when I was injured at 19, in Cincinnati. Cincinnati's nowhere near the size of Atlanta. So seeing the size of our city and the number of players that we have, both youth and adult, it is a very tight knit community, I believe. I mean, we have one of the largest, if not the largest, adult hockey community in the country, which is amazing. And I think a lot of that fuels, our youth development. But for me, it's that connection. And one of the things that I've learned, as we've been, building and getting ready to open the hockey barn, has been, my connection to, the professional player and elite level, players, and just seeing how a lot of those folks know each other, and have shared stories, have shared travel hockey trips. So I think there's a major connection here, which is great to see.
Now, while there are so many pros that you and me both see, positives about the Georgia hockey scene, obviously you've also built the hockey barn to address some of the cons. What precise failure point in Georgia hockey is the barn primarily designed to solve? Is it recruitment, retention, practice frequency, coaching quality, social belonging, player advancement? Is it all of the above?
It's tough because I will tell you. So like when I first like, and this is going to be maybe a long-winded answer. So when I started putting together my notes, which ultimately turned into what are we playing for, and then it was really kind of the backbone of building the hockey barn. It started off with a very negative undertone, meaning like what needs to be fixed. I quickly realized that's not the way I want to look at this. Although there are many failure points with anything, right? Like, and that's anything in life, business, sports. For me, it was creating and it was creating the ability to unify. Because one of the things that's really kind of fragmented in Atlanta hockey, specifically youth hockey, is it's very rink centric, which is wonderful. People get to choose and pick the rinks they want to be a part of and belong to. But for me, I've had kids that have played at almost every rink. I've coached at almost every rink, and I really wanted to create a unification. No matter what rink you play for, no matter what logo is on the front of your jersey, I wanted to build a place that provided access for anyone who wanted to enjoy the sport and for people who want to fall more in love with the sport or haven't fallen in love with it yet and want to find that love for the sport. So for me, it was, you going back to your failure point. I mean, retention is a big part within USA hockey around the country. We get people into the sport and we lose them. The main reason why we lose people is because of environment and not great experiences. And that's at a national level, not necessarily just Georgia. But also here it's access. We don't have access to hockey the way I had and the way others have had in other areas. So providing that resource, but our pillars are train, compete, and belong. So that access is to train, put in those extra touches, get those extra 1,000 shots this week. You know what I mean? Compete. Have the ability to compete in small area games, 3-on-3 bar battles, but also have that element of belonging, which is really the ability to unite with your friends that may play at a different rink, and be able to kind of be on the barn team together and still have those opportunities. So that's really where I want to go with it. Rather than focus on negatives, it's really that unification and access to both adult and youth players.
You just brought up that crucial word, environment, and you bring up that it's the biggest problem facing youth hockey in your book, which you mentioned as well. What are we playing for? What did you feel you needed to get right about the environment you're building at the hockey barn to truly help grow the game?
Yeah. So and I talk about my coaching philosophy, in the book, and it's something I've lived by for almost 3 decades now. My coaching philosophy aligns directly with my leadership philosophy, which is the three loves. And for hockey, it's love the game, be passionate about the game, right? As a player, as a fan, as a teammate, right? As a parent, whatever your level is, love that game. Love the environment, which is what you asked about. Environment is coaches, teammates, parents, your rink, right? The ability to have fun, like everything that surrounds what creates your hockey experience. And then the last is really loving who you become through the game, right? Like, hockey, has given me a lifetime of experience. And as a coach, we coach the whole human, not just players as a player and as a means to an end. And that end is winning games. The best coaches coach humans, not players. So for me, creating that environment, which was your question, was, how can we create an environment where we humanize coaching, coach that whole human, right? We create an element of fun, right? We gotta have fun. And we're doing things, you talk about the environment. We're doing things like glow in the dark hockey. We're doing puck putt, which is, the ability to play putt putt, but you're doing it on the ice, with stick and puck. We're doing broom ball and bringing in these things that just enhance the level of fun around this. And that environment creates an experience that makes people want to come back and that enables people to fall in love with the sport.
I already knew you had your own understanding of the game here in the scope of Georgia, but you've also surrounded yourself with people who grew up in it. You talk about Ian McDonald, guys like Zach Yoder and Logan Stein and Austin McGarrett. How important have they been to understanding the issues that may present themselves in this venture?
And they've been absolutely wonderful. My relationship with Austin goes back a few years. I've coached Austin's younger brother, Liam, who's an excellent player as well. So I got exposed and it was introduced to Austin years ago. And then, got to follow his journey and stay, very, very tightly engaged with him as he's progressed. Which has also led me to, have introductions to guys like Zach and Logan Stein and others in the area. But really, my vision and goal of having guys like that engaged is that they've lived what it's like trying to become an elite player and have fun playing the sport in Georgia. I didn't experience that. So as an outsider coming in and trying to impact the developmental environment, in Georgia, it'd be irresponsible for me to say, here's what I think needs to be done. But I didn't grow up here. I didn't experience what they did. So I felt it was paramount to have people who have experienced it, and to understand, what they would have used, what they would have liked to have, and it's turned into, Zach Yoder being our head of player development and Logan Stein being our head of goalie development. They're great players. I'll tell you what, they're amazing coaches as well. And having those two from a coaching perspective, and now Austin, is living his hockey playing dream, and he's going to play over in the Dell, which is so exciting for him, to go over and play for the Ice Tigers in Nuremberg over in Germany. But he'll be involved as a pro ambassador. But all three of them have made a major impact on how we created curriculum structure, building the right environment, and giving them the vision I have for the hockey barn, and having them provide feedback on how we can amplify it and make it great for youth and adults here in Georgia.
Maybe something they've been able to highlight for you, something that you said earlier is a national problem. It's not just a Georgia problem, but talking about retention. Where are Georgia players most commonly lost from the pipeline, and why do you think they leave?
Wow. So that's a hard question. So my belief is there's typically two major milestones in youth playing experiences, and where players burn out. And it's at age 13 and it's at age 17. And you kind of think about like the way those align. You've got, puberty taking place right around that 13 age. And then you have the introduction of uh, you know, different lifestyle changes, the ability to drive at age 17, the injection of, dating and things that can complicate and become distractions to a hockey journey. So for me, typically most players, and this is nationally, are we're losing somewhere around 13 and 17. Okay. And that's the ones that are in our player pipeline. But in Georgia, I'm seeing that we have, another challenge, which is this gap from learn to play, and getting people through learn to play at a young age and entering them into, our USA hockey, player pipeline, which is, house league, then to, select teams, then on to travel hockey. So that gap of the players that enter, learn to play, and then exit before, we get to, inject them into, USA hockey is fairly high. And I'd love to see some stats and numbers on this. I'm talking with, and working with the NHL now on some concepts and philosophies for learn to play. And, my the way I'm looking at it to remove that gap, which I believe is one of our biggest hurdles here, is learn to play needs to gravitate into love to play. And if we can't make that connection early enough, provide them with a great environment and guide them into that love of the game, we won't even have them in our pipeline. So, I believe we have to start there. Then we also have to be cognizant of that first burnout phase at 13. And still making the game fun and engaging and accessible at 13. And then at 17, like, let's make sure we've got good solutions for these players. Right now, we do not have a great, what I'll call like midget major, that 16U, or really midget major is 18U. But like once our players get into midget age, which is 16, you got midget minor at 16U and then midget major at 18U. We lose a lot. We don't have great house programs at those ages, and our travel and select programs really diminish. So we could probably do a better job in those areas. But again, it all starts with the beginning of that pipeline and building that funnel at learn to play and getting them from learn to play to love to play.
I think that's beautifully, beautifully said what you're saying there about transitioning learning to play into loving to play. I think that's a lot of what you're trying to build at the barn. You've described it as in one sentence a hockey playground and at times a country club style experience. How do you balance those two identities?
You know what? It's hard because at the heart it's a playground. Like, when we do our tours and do our onboarding, parents like, man, I wish I had this as a kid. I'm like, even cooler. You've got it as an adult. So like this playground isn't just for kids. The tie to a country club experience, and we've evolved from this, in kind of like early development and explaining to people what the barn is, since it is like it's a one of its kind. This doesn't exist anywhere. So, the original tie to the country club was really more of like membership and that sense of, belonging to a club, a social club. We've really kind of evolved past this country club connotation because there is a stigma around that. For some people it means something different than others. So we've really evolved away from the country club aspect. The parallels between a country club and us is really the belonging component, the membership component. And I do want to speak to that because, people ask like, well, why can't anybody just come? Well, there's a few reasons, okay? Hockey in Georgia is very transactional. Pay for an open skate. You pay for your skates to get sharpened. You pay for drop-in hockey. You pay for this league and that league. You pay for this clinic and that clinic. It's all very coin operated and transactional. That's not my vision. My vision is to create a non-transactional hockey platform, which the only way to do that then is to create a membership base, right? And our pillars are train, compete, and belong. You really can't operate a transactional hockey environment, and have belonging be a big part of that. So for us to drive belonging and community, we decided to make it a membership-based community. And people can choose to be a part of that community or not. So anyways, I hope that maybe dispels some of that conflict potentially with, the country club lifestyle, because we are not going away from the playground. It is absolutely a playground. The membership non-transactional approach is part of the vision. And it ties directly into our sense of belonging in the building of the community.
It sounds to me like what you're saying is you're trying to pack in as many benefits into a membership fee as you can, as opposed to making it, as itemized of a receipt as possible. Right now, the most current price that I've seen is $150 a month, and you're also accepting requests for tours around the facility as we speak. What all does a $150 membership provide to its members?
Yeah. So our $150 membership tier is our limited 5, which gives you in a month's time span access to 5 guided or free play sessions, as well as unlimited access to our community aspect, which is, events, watch parties. So think of it, again, hate to tie it to the country club, but think of it as, unlimited access to the clubhouse, and a limited number of times you can get out on the course. And this program was actually driven by feedback from our members, and from our potential founding members, and people who would come in and do tours said, look, I love this, but I don't know if unlimited makes sense for me right now because I may only be able to get there 4 times in a month. And so can you build something or offer something that's maybe a little more flexible? And if we can get there more, we can increase. And so, Ian, my GM, and I sat down and said, yeah, this is very, very logical. So we put together a program that enables, members to choose from, both a limited 5 membership, a limited 10 membership, and then we have our unlimited barn access membership. So people are allowed to choose, and enabled to choose what's going to match their lifestyle. And people have loved it. We've actually already had people that actually have signed up at a limited 5. We haven't even opened yet. And they called back and said, "Hey, can we ship that to a limited 10? Because I think we're going to be able to get there more than we originally thought." And of course, the answer is yes. And for people who have started with a barn access, who believe they can get there quite often, if lifestyle changes and they can't, well, then we'll ship down to other packages. We really want it to be lifestyle matching, so that people can leverage it and use it, as they see fit.
I think that's great to show that kind of flexibility and trying to get people with, different kinds of lives, more of options to try and get them in the building.
Yeah.
I want to ask about the synthetic ice. Why was synthetic ice the right foundation for the barn? And what are the developmental advantages and disadvantages compared with refrigerated ice?
Yeah. So, like, I'm a hockey purist. This vision didn't start with synthetic, but the vision started with like an agnostic skating platform that at the time you just think it's natural ice. And once I started doing my research, I started getting quotes on building out, natural ice, with refrigeration. And then I looked at the type of buildings that I would need to accommodate that ability. It really made my selection limited. So, although cost was the big part of it, it was really like location was a major piece for me. As well as, the building, because I had this vision on the environment from day one to create the playground. But once I learned that it was going to be really challenging to find the location I wanted, to find the building that would be able to facilitate fully refrigerated natural ice rink, and not only just one, but it would have been 2, because I wanted to have a training lab as well as the barnyard rink. I started to do my research. And this was years ago. So, I mean, I spent 24 months doing research on different synthetic materials. I tested them. I mean, I literally tested for over a year, myself, my family, others, until I locked in on a material that you can't buy, online. It's not a retail product. It's imported from Germany, and everything that we can do on natural ice translates to that synthetic material. And once I figured out that I could achieve what I want to do with a synthetic material, I locked in on it. But it was up in the air for a little while, because I wasn't going to select something that wouldn't translate like the material we up does.
It sounds like you've made the right choice for the business, but in your tours and talking with families, parents, players, coaches, is that something that they've been skeptical on? And if so, what do you tell them?
You know what? I think any hockey purist is skeptical about synthetic. Um, and the big reason is most people have experienced synthetic, at their neighbor's house, in their basement, the stuff they go buy at Pure Hockey, which is wonderful for certain purposes. But for a commercial setting, nobody is skated on the material that we have. And when we have from people coming in from our pro level players, down to somebody who's just beginning to play, they realize that this is a game changer. And when we're doing our tours, and my team is signing up memberships at the end of those tours, because people are so blown away with the way it translates, we know we've done something right. So I expect there to be skeptics, and that's okay. That's natural. But my challenge is, come try it out. Come see it, because it's not like anything you've ever skated on before, period. So I invite that.
Well, let's talk about the big news that's come out recently, something that I'm really excited about. You recently became an official partner for the Atlanta Gladiators. The announced areas of collaboration include community initiatives, fan engagement, special events, ticket offers, and member experiences. How did this relationship begin, and who approached whom?
So first off, um, The Glads are a huge part of our hockey community, along with the Lobsters and others. And I was actually introduced through a mutual friend to the person who's over partnerships for the Gladiators. And we hit it off basically at first conversation. And I believe it was probably fairly mutual in the excitement to drive some type of collaboration, and figure out where we could take that partnership. And, the folks that were involved are people that understood, from the Glad's perspective, they understood the vision. They understood the environment, that we were building. And they were excited to be a part of it, as well as me being thrilled to be a part of, the Glad's family and support all the great things that we're doing, around, our professional players and fans. So it was really a no-brainer, quite honestly.
I know, we're still in the early days of this partnership, but whether it be soon or down the line, do you think that this partnership will create any formal pathway for a young player, or should not be maybe described as part of a competitive advancement pipeline, your partnership with the Glads?
Well, I have to be careful on what I say in conversations, but I mean, one of the first things I said was, we need to figure out a way to, create and build and amplify, our learn to play program, and tying, learn to play into love to play. So I think there's absolutely opportunities, similar to, and I know the league really well, the way that the Stingrays, in Charleston have created their junior Stingrays program has really been phenomenal. They've embraced that environment. They've embraced the youth hockey scene, and they've done a great job. And I believe there's an opportunity for us to do something like that here as well.
100%. And I think that's something I've talked a lot about with the Savannah Ghost Pirates as well. It's
Yeah.
not something they're implementing just yet, but that's coming down the pike for them. And I'm really excited about that as well. I want to talk about location. You're based in the Alpharetta, kind of Milton area. And of course, there's a possibility that NHL hockey could eventually come to that part of Metro Atlanta, whether in Alpharetta or Forsyth County. What would an NHL franchise mean for the youth hockey ecosystem you're trying to help build? And where would you want the hockey barn to fit into that puzzle?
Wow. That that's a loaded question, but it's a great question. Um, you know, there are plenty of people that would love to have an NHL team back, myself included. Um, I think that we have had so much development in our youth hockey programs, in our adult hockey programs, expanding into adult learn to play, into women's hockey. I believe that the NHL would bring such a great component to really amplify the community, amplify the growth, and bring amazing access to all of those people that love hockey as a player, as a fan, as a coach, as a referee, as a hockey mom and dad. Like, I think it would do amazing things for us. And then to the question of where would the barn fit, I've had conversations, and Anson Carter has been a great friend to the hockey barn. And I was introduced to Anson through the NHL, and I absolutely love his vision. I love what he wants to do for the community, and I love that the hockey barn could play a major role, not only in what we're doing currently, but also in future vision and future impact. Because I believe that vision that he has, is so powerful and can do so many great things for our hockey community. So I am a very hard supporter.
Well, Kyle, I think it's easy to see why you've been in coaching so long. Your love of the game is very invigorating to be around. I know we're many miles away as we speak, but let's take a look into the crystal ball for a second. Let's say 5 years from now, which metrics will tell you that the hockey barn is succeeding?
Wow. So I think there's going to be a few things, and I'm going to start in our backyard. So I think our flagship location being our Milton location. The metric there is going to be number of hockey lovers that we have created. It's going to be folks that have never played before that are getting into the game for the first time, youth and adults. The way we track that, in hockey, is how many folks are signing up to be, part of USA Hockey, which means I've got my USA Hockey number. I'm now into a program, youth or adult. And there's different avenues to impact. There's players, there's coaches, there's officials. So I want to impact the number of people that we are driving into this hockey community, from both a quantity perspective as well as a quality perspective. I want to be able to provide enough access, guidance, coaching, and mentorship to where our youth players have a much cleaner path to next level hockey. Right now, we lose a lot of players. I say lose. A lot of our players have to leave at age 16 to go play prep school, to go play, at junior levels, when they get of age. And we really don't have enough access for tier one hockey here locally. I would love to be able to figure out a way and a metric to track how we can impact that, and so that we can have our local players stay here and play at that level and still be able to make it to NCAA Division I hockey, become pro players, etc. So I think that helps answer kind of like the local question. I really want to impact our community here. The other metric is, I want to be able to expand. I want to be able to create access all around, Atlanta and all around Georgia. And that may look like multiple locations. So beyond that, I've already been looking at expansion plans. I have already had multiple investors and individuals reach out about franchising and will we build this and where can we go next. So I do believe on the horizon is going to be, a very aggressive expansion plan, but only as aggressive as the culture and vision and execution of that will take us.
So much to be excited about as a young hockey player here in Georgia, thanks to the work that Kyle and the Hockey Barn are doing. You can buy his book, What Are We Playing For, on Amazon. You can go ahead and reach out for a tour or pricing at thehockeybarnatl.com. There's also a bunch of great stuff over on their Facebook at The Hockey Barn. Kyle, anything else you want to plug before we let you go here?
I don't really want to plug anything, but I do want to thank you for all the great work that you're doing to build this hockey community, to spread great things that are happening within the hockey community. I just can't thank you enough. So I really appreciate what you're doing.
Well, that warms my heart, Kyle, and those are really kind words to hear, and we really appreciate you coming in and joining us on the show, spending some time out of your busy day.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me.
For those of you who haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe here on the Peach State Puck YouTube channel. Follow us on everywhere you get your podcasts, and don't forget to follow us on socials as well. Peach State Puck on Facebook, Matteen Rad on Instagram, and Matteen Rad on TikTok as well. For me and Kyle, we both thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.